Welcome everybody to this week of Washed in the Wild. I hope we got a good one for you. We're down a man. Gentry's working, and
likely story.
Yeah, likely story. He better be working. He's been fishing every night this week. He caught a bunch of pike.
There you go.
And maybe with the cold front.
He's working that fish.
Yeah. And my fellas over here, you guys don't sound so good. So how about this? I'll pray and we'll pray for you, and that I don't get sick. So
mine's allergies. Happens every spring.
Really?
Yep.
Oh. All right. Father, thank you so very much for the opportunity we get to come before you today to share hopefully a little bit of knowledge and wisdom, and bring some joy and goodness to the radio waves. When we all know we live in a broken world, but there's peace and love and goodness everywhere. We just got to look for it. I just pray over Reyer and Matt as whether it's sicknesses, allergies, or whatever it is that your healing touch could extend over them. And we pray for traveling mercies for Gentry to get back home. Lord, we love you and praise your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Amen.
Yeah. All right. So we've talked some of this, but I'd like to go into a little bit of, hopefully a lot bit of discussion on the different types of public lands. And I was actually walking on a walk with a guy at work, and we were talking about the podcast, and he's like, you guys should talk about what your favorite type of public land is. And I was like, and the more I thought about it, I was like, oh, dang, that's kind of a good idea. So, Nick, this one's for you. And if you don't listen, I'm going to be angry. So there's a lot out there. And I'm admittedly just did the research on the ones in North Dakota, and Matt and Reyer, you guys done a lot more hunting outside of the state, hunting and fishing probably outside of the state than I have. So if you guys think of any others, feel free to jump in and share anything. The big one that if you're in the state of North Dakota is our plots ground. You don't have to go very far, and you see those yellow triangles everywhere, which I think is a nice touch. Have you guys in your travels, have you ever seen a marked, say public hunting as well as our plots are?
Yes.
Do you have an example?
Well,
More.
I mean, most state agencies. I was just trying to think. There's one in. I think
But how they're
Kansas is marked that way too, but it's not
like
an upside down triangle, but
it's the corners of the property, so you know which way is.
yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
And I think it's called Weehaw or something like that.
that sounds like
It's like plots,
yeah.
private land open to sportsmen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Weehaw's like walk-in hunting access or something like that. I want to say.
Yeah, Montana has the one I'm most familiar with outside of the state is block management areas. Similar concept. They have, I think it's a little more regulated. They have two different types. They have type 1 and type 2, and I might be getting this backwards. But type 1 is like you have to get permission, like written permission or like over the phone permission from the landowner to say that, you're going to be in there, because they can have like limits on the number of hunters that are in there within a certain day and whatnot. I wouldn't say they're marked quite as well in terms of like corners and stuff, but they have designated entry points that are marked online, like on Onyx and stuff. And at those entry points, there are boxes, like sign-in boxes. And so type 2, the difference is you don't have to get permission. You just have to sign in. Like you fill out a little card and drop it in the box. So they have a record of who was there, when they were there, what they were hunting, and all that kind of stuff. And you're hunting it illegally if you don't sign into those boxes.
No, okay.
So in order to hunt it, like the plots, you're pretty free to, however you can legally access, as long as you're not driving or I actually found out today looking up you can't ride horseback on plots either.
Oh, really?
I
Yep.
saw that too.
I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah, I almost.
But yeah, no driving, anything like that. But however you can legally access the plots you can get on. But those BMAs, you have to, at least when you first enter the property for like whatever your period of time is that you're hunting, you have to sign into the box. And so I think that's at least a nice kind of process for keeping track of how much the lands are being used.
Yeah.
So
Type
I
1 is
hunted
the
those a lot.
box.
They both have boxes.
Voluntary or allows minister their own permission.
Okay,
Type
yeah, I had it
1's
backwards. So
yeah.
type 1 is you can sign yourself in. Type 2, you have to get like permission from the landowner. So it's basically, type 2 is basically just like any other private land, except the process is streamlined and the landowners are, presumably expecting to be
People to
contacted
call.
about it. I've hunted both types and I've had nothing but good interactions. So
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah.
As a landowner, that's obviously, you're probably a busy person in the first place. We all are. And to make yourself available like that, that's pretty cool. So we touched on a couple things. And I got some notes here. So yes, plots in North Dakota, for you, those of you who don't know, is walk-in access only, no motorized vehicles. And then just a couple side notes for the plots. If you're an out-of-stater, for the first 7 days of the pheasant season, it is closed to out-of-state hunters, and that as well as wildlife management areas.
is that new?
No,
Nope, it's always
been that way.
Yeah,
Since we've been here anyway.
Yeah, same as wildlife management areas. And it's only technically you can only use plots during the
Active hunting
active
season.
hunting
Right.
seasons.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think I shared with that. I tried to find something that said anything about fishing because the name of it's public land open to sportsmen, right? But that essentially says it right there. If it's outside of a hunting season, it's closed.
But you can predator hunt
Yeah,
on plots, which is essentially year round.
essentially year round. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. So as long as you bring your rifle with you. Anyways.
That is one thing I'll throw out about BMAs in Montana that I did not mention is I think it's nice for the landowners too because they can, and I don't know exactly what the process is, but they can designate what times of the year or within a certain season they want it to be available. So like there's certain properties where they might be available for the first half of the season, but not the second half. So if like the landowner has farming practices or cattle in there or whatever, they can like basically set it up so that they don't have people, accessing that land when they have stuff going on where they wouldn't want hunters in there. So I know plots is you're kind of, if you're in, that's just the way it is. So
Yeah.
the landowners don't have quite as much flexibility, I guess, but
Yeah, another thing that I thought was interesting, and I've noticed this quite a bit is, there's a lot of ranch ground around here that there's plots on, and it's not closed if there's livestock there. Yeah, obviously you got to be smart and not harass the livestock or do anything like that. But it's
I've seen two that have been closed like during gun season, rifle season for deer.
oh really?
Yep, they have they're bright orange, those signs that they put up.
I don't know. Yeah, they might be. I don't know what color they are. I've seen them
Oh,
before. Though.
I've
They're
seen
like
them before, too,
underneath
yeah.
the actual
Yep.
triangle sign.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess I forgot about that.
So I've seen two.
But I mean, that's as a landowner, that's a risk. Unless you get something like that, that's a risk you're, being incentivized to take because there are kickbacks from the state by entering that program. So.
Yeah, then we talked about this one last week, and I should have done a little bit more of my homework. So about the state trust lands, or we call them the school sections. There is a ton of money that they raise through these state trust lands. Like I found this, it was in the, like, I'm not kidding you, it was in the billions of dollars. Now I think what that is the like if you total up the the
value
of the land,
all the land,
yeah.
plus the rental
Rental
lease
and all
payments.
that stuff. Yeah.
Hey, before we jump off plots,
Yeah.
You can have a deer stand on plots, but you have to take it off.
Correct.
You have to be with it. So if you go put up, you need a climbing stand or a saddle or something like that. You can't leave it overnight. You can't leave it for the season and stuff like that.
That actually reminds me of something else. Because it is private land, there's all these rules. But if you look at the language, from Game and Fish, basically anything that is legal to do on any land, like your own private land, for example, you can do it on plots with the landowner's written permission. So if you want to drive on the property, it's not like you have no shot. Like you can talk to the landowner and you can say, hey, I have a buddy who his family owns some plots, and he's said before, he's just like, he runs people off during duck season that drive on to the plots land, and he just tells them as they're leaving, he's like, look, all you had to do was ask. I probably would have let you, as long as the field's not going to get torn up or whatever. So whether it's horseback or tree stands or whatever it is, like, there's always that option. If there's something you really want to do on plots ground, like you have, it's not a guarantee, but reach out to the landowner and see if you can get that written permission. So, yeah.
And in writing is the key there, right? So when you were in Montana, you had to get written permission or verbal when you called up?
Well, so the way that they did it when I had verbal permission, I never actually went to a landowner and got him or her to sign something. The couple of times that I got it was over the phone. And then basically what they had me do was write my name on a sheet of paper and then phone number. And then I can't remember what it was, but some kind of identifier, if it was something we talked about on the phone, so they would know, I talked to this person.
Yeah.
And what you'd do is you'd put it on the dash of your car.
Oh.
And so if your vehicle's sitting at the gate or whatever, they walk up, they can see okay, this person has this sheet of paper with the instructions that I gave them. So I know that I've spoken to them, and I can, if I have any questions, their phone number's right there. I can call them. So although it's not in writing, always by the actual handwriting of the landowner, it's some kind of identifiable slip that says hey, I've talked to this person. So that's the way that it was done a couple of times I did that. But
that's pretty cool. Because otherwise, I can imagine that would be it would be a pain for both the landowner and you, right? I mean, it's the letter of the law and something you should do, but I wish I could find that. There was it was anything else on plots?
No, I'm looking one thing up. But go ahead.
And as far as I know, so overall, with all of these, what the whole point of this is, we're trying to, encourage you to take advantage of the public land that's out there. I mean, I think a lot of states, you're blessed with public access, and you got to work hard at it. But there's a lot more ground out there than you think, right? And we've talked about the different apps and applications and different things like that. But the thing with public ground and all these different ones, they all kind of have their own little idiosyncrasies. Most of them default to especially the federal ground. Most of them default to the state agency that manages the wildlife. Not all of them, right? So you do need to do your research on these, and the some of the federal ground is a little kind of gets a little crazy in finding whether it is open or is not open. But for the most part, I mean, when I did my Googling, I don't know about you guys, but I just did a wildlife management area regulations, plots regulations, and it was right there, right? It wasn't rocket science to find most of this stuff. So, so state trust lands, it was kind of interesting. So you were right, when you talked about it, the way the legislation was originally written, it was supposed to go to universities, but this it does look like now it is the school districts, but I couldn't find, you know, and all those numbers that I said I found it looked like it went to the school districts, but the way it's still the way the legislation is written, it goes to the university system closest to wherever it is, which is kind of ambiguous.
I think the school districts, my understanding is that they're used as like identifiers for the land, that whatever piece of land it is, you know, because sometimes for whatever reason you can have multiple pieces within the same township, you know, because it originally was like one, you know, square mile, one section per township. But there's obviously a bunch of places where you have bigger tracts than that. So I don't exactly know how that all shook out, but I think that they use the school districts as like identifiers for the different places. But
so the just high level on these, they are open to public hunting. I don't know that or public access. So I don't know that there is, unless it's marked. I don't know. There isn't a season where you cannot use this ground. It's walk and access only, hiking, bird watching, berry picking for personal consumption, hunting and fishing. That is where is the activities that you can do on this ground, and they're you know, for I think depending on who you are, I've heard it said the onyx really killed the honey hole for these things. You know, there's a lot of people that were like, man, this used to be mine and nobody knew about it, and now everybody knows where they're at now. You know, because they're not marked at all, right? Mm-hmm. You know, that's the thing that is unique about these. With, you know, unless because there are some of these where some ground out where we hunt where they're closed to public access.
Yep.
Then it says closed to hunting. Mm-hmm. And I think some of these are, you know, if there's, you know, the landowner lives, you know, it has a house or residence close to them, or for whatever reason they're closed. So
I know some of them up by like some of the sites that I work on related to abandoned mines. They have a number of those areas that are closed to the public for safety. And they have those signs because there's sinkholes. Yeah. So that it's, you know, it's hazardous. It's like a lot of them, there's a lot of places where the sinkholes aren't that big of a deal. You could walk or climb out of them. But like if you're walking in the dark, you know, and then some of them will drop open, especially this time of year with the spring, like freeze thaw. I mean, you'll have sinkholes that could be 20 feet deep that drop open and they're smaller than this tabletop at the entrance, you know, so you have stuff like that can be pretty hazardous. So I think that's the main, kind of like you said, that's the main time I've seen them marked is when they're not open.
So yes, same thing, walk and access only. You can, and this you actually have to go to the state and request, you'd have to get written permission to drive in. I haven't ever done that. There's a couple of these I kind of want to, just some ground out to where we hunt. It does say the lease has, you know, like if they're, you know, if they lease it and they have livestock or something there, they obviously can drive on it. But not, you know, they specifically call out you cannot drive on it for hunting purposes. Like, you know, you can't shoot from a vehicle or anything like that. But there's, you know, like this is one of those that you really should just call it the game and fish. There's a section line that's state ground, or this what do we call these things? State trust land on both sides, north and south of the section line, to get to some private land that it would have access to hunt. And it, you know, it's like it'd be like a 1.5 mile walk to get back in there. So I always kind of wondered, like, if I'm going back there during deer season, are they really going to hassle me about that or not? But anyways.
You mean driving the section line?
Yeah, correct.
That seems to be an acceptable practice.
I would agree, but
yeah, it can get a little dangerous because, like, anybody that's been out on them much, you'll see those section lines where, you know, you have an established, you know, 2-track that's running down the section line, and then there's a pond right in the vine, and then
actually
drives around and it goes 100 feet out into the field, and technically, like, even though that's the line, you're trespassing because of the fact that you have a 30-foot, I think it's a 30-foot wide, it's either 30 foot or 30 foot on either side from center right of way for the section line. So if you're driving, if you're going around a pond, even if it's on a 2-track, like, you're breaking the law by doing that. So you have to be careful.
And that was this one that specifically that I'm talking, that exact scenario goes on.
I've seen it a bunch of times.
I don't know if it's 30 foot, but it's got to be close.
It's something like that. Yeah.
One of the ranchers that we hunt on was catching some grief. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, that some hunters said that you have to let me drive into that school land. Across his private property, and in the regs it specifically says that the landowner does not have to allow you access.
Yeah.
And there's no section line in this case.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't.
Just cutting across the middle.
Yeah, you'd have to. That's the only way you could get there.
Well, even
and
if
you can't even get all the way there. Actually.
Well, even if there was a section line, if it's private on both sides, that's that would be an interesting one. That depends on who you ask. But I wouldn't think if it's private on both sides, does that mean that even though it's a section line, that's an easement and you have the right to be there?
My perspective is, if you're in a situation where it's fenced off and the section line is in between the fences, then you're going to be fine. If it's private on either side and you've got fences on either side and the section line is in between, that way you're not opening gates, you're not driving into crop fields, you're not. But if you're in a situation where there's a marked section line and there's a gate you have to open, or you're driving, through the edge of what somebody's planting or something like that, like, that's a situation where I would probably avoid it, just because, like, you don't really know. Although if you call Game and Fish, they might say, if there's a 2-track there and it's marked, on the maps or whatever, then you're fine. But it's kind of that, like you said, that's one of those situations where you're just going to be better off to call and make sure before you start,
walking,
slinging mud or walking or whatever you're doing. So the one thing I will add too that bums me out in North Dakota about the state trust lands is that there's no camping.
Yeah.
In Montana, and this is one of those state things, it's federal legislation that began that program, but the states, they can be
more restrictive,
anything equal to or more restrictive than the federal government. So in North Dakota, you can't camp on state trust lands. In Montana, if it hasn't changed, you can for up to, I think it's 14 days. But it has to be something where there's drive up access. So if it's like I crossed some private ground that I have access to on foot, and then to this landlocked piece of state trust land, I can't camp there. So there's caveats to it, but I wish there was some kind of leeway in North Dakota for some kind of camping, because I enjoy doing that. But we don't hunt that much state trust land anyway, so it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But
and you've talked about this, but it's the the national grasslands, that's open to it, but that's, to your point, that's the national legislation that allows you to do that.
Yeah, you can on state forest in North Dakota. There's like 5 state forests in North Dakota you can camp on. BLM, everywhere that I've been, you can camp on. Mm-hmm. Generally, from what I've seen, that's not usually tampered with by the states. It pretty much is mostly the same. And then I learned today, looking some stuff up, that wildlife management areas in North Dakota you can also camp on in most cases.
And you can camp on national grasslands.
National grasslands, yeah. So any of the national stuff, generally you're going to be okay, but always look it up. That's 90% of the public lands research that I do is, can I camp on this? Like Corps of Engineers land, you can camp on. Depending on the state, it's different. But like in North Dakota, you can camp in designated areas in Corps land. You can't camp anywhere you want, but then there's certain pieces where that might change a little bit. So.
Really?
You kind of got to see, yeah.
Yeah, that was, I guess I wasn't really looking at it for that. I just kind of, because that was one of the ones I looked up. Whether, it's open to hunting, and I never really looked if you could camp on it. I know a ton of people do, because that's a common thing. You take a boat, you Lake Skakawea, you go and find a bay somewhere and pull it up on the shore and sleep, whatever you want to do. So, but anyways, getting back to the state trust lands, we talked about drive on access. It says, who can use established trails across state trust lands? And it says trails across school trust lands are for agricultural use only. So this would be not section lines, but 2-track going in the middle of the state trust land. So trails across school trust lands are for agricultural use only and are not established trails for public use. Only trails clearly marked with game and fish trail markers are open to motorized vehicles and are identified by one of the following signs. And there's some signs here. I've honestly I've seen a lot of these state trust lands and I've never seen one of these signs. School trust lands are open to non-vehicular public access only. You may not drive on school lands. Park your vehicle and walk when hunting or retrieving game on school trust lands. Legal access can be attained via section lines and public roads, but is not guaranteed. In some cases, terrain and other natural obstructions may make access difficult. So, anyways, yeah, when it comes down to it, do the right thing. Try to call someone, and if you don't know you have access to be there, probably don't go there, right?
Or you could just walk.
True.
I feel like the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, rewards you for putting in the work too.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes even when you can drive, doing some walking is a good thing. And there's been plenty of times where I've had those situations where I've been like a little bit unsure about driving access for whether it's a section line or something like that. And you just get out and put miles on the boots.
Yeah.
It's good for you.
I agree. Okay, maybe this one answers the question right here. Does the public have a right to cross private land to access trust lands? This is what it says verbatim. Some trust land is not easily accessible. If the section line on private property is not passable, there is no right to drive off the section line on private property. I guess it doesn't say what if you walk. Because I'll be honest with you, there's some ground out where we hunt that the section line is not drivable. It's very clearly, it's a landlocked piece of, meaning it's fully surrounded by private ground. There's no 2-fence section line. It's one fence posted on both sides. And it's those scenarios that I'm wondering about, like, what is the letter of the law there? Especially if it's very clearly marked that the landowners on the other side don't want anybody going on their land, right? So that would be the interesting one.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, I always get a little, I don't know, I get a little uncomfortable with the walking on section lines because generally you're going to have a weapon in your hands.
Yeah.
And, it seems more logical that people would be okay with you walking rather than driving in those situations. But the optics of it is like if somebody sees you, you're walking across their land with a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of looks like you're hunting it,
Yeah.
So it's not to say that that's not legal. I don't know. I'm not privy to all those rules, and it's probably somewhat case by case. But like I hesitate to say like, oh, there's a gate here. I'm going to hop the gate and walk my way in on this section line between two chunks of private land because I can see the 2-track and it doesn't bend out or anything like that. I'm not comfortable with that because I'm like, I don't want somebody to come by and, see me walking down. Even if obviously, in that situation, your gun's unloaded. If you're walking for pheasants, you're not going to be shooting pheasants on the section line.
Yeah.
You can't do that, even though it's seen, the pheasant's right in the middle, whatever. You're not going to be doing that. You need to have your gun unloaded, be following all the rules. But I don't know, that makes me a little nervous.
Yeah.
You never know. Like there are people out here that, they don't want anybody on their land and whatever it might be. Like they might be pretty ornery if you're doing something like that. And even if you are in the right, like you could put yourself in a sticky situation, so I just avoid that, but
ask permission.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing is that best thing to do is just ask permission.
Yep, that solves all the problems.
Correct.
So,
I meant to bring this up, and I hope we don't. Well, I'll just bring it up now. And when you're asking for permission, right now it's March, April. No, it's April 1st.
Yep, April 1st.
This is a great time, or if you have any idea what's going on with farming and ranching, fall is nutso, right? That's harvest season and a lot of things that are doing. Granted, now probably isn't a great time, but I guess my point is, if you want to ask for permission to get on somebody's ground, don't call them the day before, a busy weekend that in the fall, right? If you reach out to them, try to establish a relationship. You mentioned you're taking fudge and whatnot to, it's something small, but you're establishing a relationship with a landowner, right? That's their livelihood. They're on that ground every day, probably 365 days a year or close to it, right? And so, one of the things that we do, we help this rancher work cattle, right? I know people who drive trucks for ranchers during harvest, or just little things to help out, right? And so the point is, be prepared. Kind of if you see some ground and it's like, man, I wish I could get on that. Maybe call them during the off season and just say, hey, is there anything I can help you out with? You never know.
Yep.
Right. So.
Yeah, and trespass fees are getting more popular. That's one thing. Like, don't be shocked if you call somebody up or go to their house and you ask to hunt and they're like, hey, pay me, X amount of money to do it. Like, it happens. People do it. It's especially seems to be more popular in the West. If that's something you want to do, then go right ahead. Mm-hmm. It's not something I would probably find myself doing. But there's a lot of options out there. And the other thing I would say too is, I prefer to be in person. Like, phone calls are great, and a lot of times you will do just fine. But being in person is, I think, usually always better.
Yeah.
But obviously there's common sense involved. Like, don't show up the morning of when it's, you want to go deer hunting and it's 5 a.m. and you knock on their door. Like, you're probably not going to make any friends that way. And the other thing I would mention too is don't show up wearing full camo, everything ready to go. Like, there's probably people out there that wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
But like you said, do it in advance and don't show up, maybe in full camo, like you're ready to
with your
jump
firearm
out there, knock on their door in regular clothes and like try to, maybe start to build a relationship with them a little bit. And sometimes you could do everything right and you're still going to get no's, and sometimes you could do everything wrong and you might get yeses. So it's always worth asking. But
learn how to make good fudge.
That works too. And it's like sales, like you got to expect you're probably going to hear 99 no's for every one yes. Mm-hmm. And certain animals, certain seasons, that changes. Whether, it's duck hunting, you might have a farmer that really likes to duck hunt or has his family that comes out and duck hunts, but then a lot of farmers probably be like, I don't really care.
Yeah.
But then deer, that might be a bigger thing. You might, the guys or ladies might have gratis tags or something like that, so.
Deer and pheasants seem to be the two probably hardest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least in my experience.
Yeah, just from Gentry's story. By the way, Gentry just texted me and said he's not coming, so we have to make him feel bad. I should actually make him call in and give us his stat of the week.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I've been really impressed with. That's one of the many things I've been impressed with Gentry on is how much ground he's got access to, and I bet it might be a little different if he was pheasant or deer hunting, but yeah, if you want to, and just like, my grandparents growing up, I wouldn't say they hated waterfowl, but they were just like, get them out of here. I don't want them on my ground. So they were, they were open to whoever wanted to come hunt them. Right.
That's the way Canada is. We hunted in Saskatchewan, I think I went 13 years in a row. They just want waterfowl gone. I mean, I've had people jump in the vehicle with me and show me around and call neighbors and you got birds, you know. It depends on, you know, like Reyer said, it depends on the species and so on and the culture in that area.
Yeah.
Well, in one season or you know, pursuit of a certain species or whatever it is can lead to another. You can run into somebody that would say no to deer hunting, but they say yes to turkey hunting, and you turkey hunt there for a couple of years. You get to know the person and you do a good job. You're not leaving trash out. You're not driving where you're not supposed to be. You know, you're doing the right things. You're helping them out, whatever it is. And they might turn around and say, hey, yeah, you know, why don't you can go in there and pick up some sheds and, oh, you can go in there and deer hunt now. Like, or I'm going to go in there with my family. And then when we get our tags filled, then you can, you know, so don't disqualify yourself, I guess is what I would say, because you never know what those relationships can hold. But it's important to remember that, you know, it's a privilege that you're getting access to that. You're not entitled to that by any means.
Amen.
If you live in town, you think about it, like you can invite some people over to your house for a get together, but you're not going to be too happy if they're walking around your backyard when you're not expecting them to be there, you know,
the week after.
Exactly. Yeah. So
leaving their gum wrappers anyways. What's the like, you've hunted a fair bit in Canada. What's the public access there? Is that a thing? Do they have?
The whole time I was up there, I remember seeing one small area that had public access.
Really?
Yeah. The United States is very unique when it comes to that.
Wow.
You know, so, but it's a whole different dynamic too.
Yeah.
I mean, if you went to Saskatchewan and asked about deer hunting, you're probably going to get a no.
Yeah.
You know, but with waterfowl, all the farmers up there believe the waterfowl consume about 20% of their potential harvest. And so they want them out.
Yeah.
That's an outrageous number when you think about it. It very well could be true, but I mean, that's just, I mean, you're talking these guys that have big tracts of land, like that's, you know, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars that they could be losing. So yeah, of course they're like, these guys are going to come out and, you know, shoot.
Yeah. And especially, you know, those areas of like Alberta and Saskatchewan where there's just millions upon millions of waterfowl, you know, you can't fathom it unless you go see it. It'll blow your mind. Gentry he wouldn't know what to do with himself. Gentry would want to, I would really like to take Gentry up there because he would be like most of my other friends that I took up with me that had never been before, that are waterfowl hunters. There's a feed. No, we're not looking for that. That's not what we're looking for. And then when you finally show them what you're looking for, and there's 10,000 mallards circling the field, and you explain that's what we're looking for, they're just like, oh my, you know, they just can't fathom, or the fact that, you know, you can shoot 8 birds a day, and the only thing that's restricted is pintails, and you tell your crew, like, okay, today we want full limits. Everybody shoot a full limit of Drake mallards. You know, nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to be a pretty staunch waterfowl hunter to do that.
Yeah.
Because you've got ducks coming in and out of your decoys constantly of other species. And so a Gentry, it wouldn't shock me at all if Gentry'd be like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
You know, because they don't
shoot. I would do that.
You can't fathom the number of birds that I mean, if you get on the X, it's ridiculous. But not, I only know of one piece up there. We never even thought about public land up there. It was all just get in the truck and start driving, looking for birds, find the landowner and ask.
Yeah.
And if somebody hadn't beat you to the spot, which was pretty rare. I mean, I only had that happen a few times where somebody else had asked, because it's such vast land. Yeah. You know, it's such a vast landscape that you see them at the hotel in town, and we stayed in, good Lord, that just went right out of my head. East of Saskatoon. And there were 3 hotels in that town. And I would say that probably 99% of the people staying in those hotels were waterfowl hunters.
Yeah.
But then you go out scouting and you don't see anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Because what is that? 200-300 trucks, maybe.
I don't know. It's just everybody.
Yeah.
But a lot of people rent homes up there too.
Oh, yeah.
They'll rent a house for a week or whatever. And I don't know how you go for a week because, I mean, if you're on them for a week, I mean, you can't bring it back. You can only bring 3 limits back.
Yeah, you would hope that you're
across
not
the
getting
border.
wanting waste and stuff like that.
No, there's places you can. We had
donate.
one situation where we could donate. It was pretty reliable.
Yeah, well, yeah. Shoot, we could talk about this for. I'm not going there.
You asked us.
I know.
I'll bring something up for you.
All right.
You asked us you asked us to think about or whatever your favorite.
Oh yeah.
If it has the animal that I'm pursuing, it's my favorite.
Good point.
But what I will say is I prefer the stuff that's the furthest from the road.
Yep.
That does not have vehicular access to, because I don't care if it's 5 miles away. I don't care if I got to walk 5 miles to get to it.
Yep.
I'm doing it. So I think he has the record right now, 17 miles or something like that in one day.
I did 15 and a half
15
last
and a
year. That was my biggest day. My answer is twofold to that question. I would say my favorite to like personally use would be like the national forest or national grasslands, or depending on where you go, it could be BLM. But those federal lands that have less restrictions in terms of like camping and stuff like that, because a lot of them it's 14 days you can camp, and there's roads running through it. A lot of times like established roads that you can drive on, so you can access certain things. But more than anything, you can camp, and there's very large tracts, especially in the western North Dakota, out in the Rockies. So you can go in and you can, there's hundreds of thousands of acres of these national, public lands that even if there's 5 other cars at the trailhead, like you go off the beaten path and you can generally get away.
Yeah.
And you can be away for a long time and see new stuff every day. And especially in, further west, you get a lot of those big tracts of national forest will hook up with wilderness areas. And once you get back there, like very slim chance you're going to be seeing people, My second part is for the actual, like the logistics. My favorite for that is the private land programs in the individual states, because I think it's really cool that it's a streamlined process and it's a win-win in the sense that it's voluntary for the landowners. They're getting an incentive, some kind of monetary incentive for being a part of that program. And, within the restrictions that are laid out, the hunters can use it the way they would like to use it for hunting and stuff. So for actually being boots on the ground, I like those big tracks, but for like the way that it's set up, I think they're, like you talked about, Kansas, Montana, at least all these western states for the most part have some kind of like private land stewardship, use, public use kind of thing that I think is nice. It's a nice mix between being able to use and not making so much stuff under the thumb of the government. So.
Yeah, and it's go ahead.
What about you? Private land.
Yeah.
Water.
Yeah. Well, I would say plots, but you can't use it for fishing. I really like our plots program. I mean, I haven't done a lot of hunting in other states. I like when I compare it to, waterfowl production areas, grasslands or anything like that. It's just marked really well. You're not wondering, if you're confused and you're on some plots ground, either somebody knocked down a sign or you're just not paying attention. You're right, because it's just really well marked, and I've been pretty impressed with it. And I would say that the regulations are pretty loose. As long as you're, to your point, as long as you're up for walking, and and the first 7 days is close to out of staters. Other than that, it's a great program. So I would say that's one of my favorite. I too am partial to the grasslands, mostly because it's the one opportunity I got to hunt out west was just I've told the story. It was an epic experience, and yeah, you're right. When you can hunt 6 square miles, 7, 8 square miles, it doesn't matter if you see somebody that way. You just go the other way, right? And you don't got to worry about oh man, am I gonna go over this rise and see someone? It's so vast and so amazing. And yeah, the opportunity that you have to camp it is pretty cool. I'll share a brief story. We were 2 years ago. Eli and I my other son and I were out in the Badlands. He had a doe tag that we were trying to fill, and it was the year EHD was really bad, and if I'm honest, that was the year I pulled the tag out there. So part of it was scouting for me, and part of it was hunting for him. And I was gonna go, found the spot where it was set up for camping. Like there was even a spot where there was a 2-track into it. There was a fire ring. There was it was like not official, but and I don't even know if that fire ring was supposed to be there. But I was like, yeah, this is gonna be awesome. We get out and kind of start setting up, and all of a sudden, these cattle move in, and there was like, and I'm pretty comfortable walking around cattle, but there was this bull that was just like, you get that feeling like, I'm not setting up a tent and sleeping in it, and this is the only thing that I got. Like he was just like, he would come up every time we opened the truck door. He would just walk to the end of the truck and just sit there and stare at you. It was like,
Probably thought you were gonna feed him.
Well,
you can give him some cubes or something.
I don't know. He had that like I have a respect for critters that are. I mean, there's those things are as close to free range anything as you're gonna get. There's few fences, for miles and miles out there, and that thing, he just looked like an old prairie. Don't mess with me. I've seen it all kind of thing. Right. It was pretty cool. So I have the biblical parallel I'd like to get here, and I get your thoughts on a few things with that one. But so talked about national grasslands. I think we kind of went around that one. The only thing I don't think you can camp on 14 days. You talked about that. The only thing about national grasslands, driving cross country off a road by motorized wheeled vehicle is prohibited in the national grasslands. However, you may drive up to 300 feet off the road to camp along certain roads. So it's kind of
ambiguous.
It's kind of ambiguous, but I think the idea is you have to be within 300 feet of a road when you're camping. You can't just go camp anywhere. As far as that, is that what you had known?
That's probably right. Admittedly, I didn't, like when I was kind of car camping, like when I wasn't packing in camp on my back, I usually wasn't that far from the road. Like I would pull off on a turnout or something or whatever. And a lot of that was in the mountains, so it wasn't like you could just easily get 200-300 feet off the road, because it'd be a Forest Service road that was going up, and it's drops down and goes straight up on each side. Yeah. But there is like an ethical, I guess probably unwritten rule in the camping world that's like the rule of 200, and you're supposed to be 200 feet away from trailhead or roadways or whatever when you're camping. That's what they want. Mm-hmm. I don't really think it's that big of a deal in a lot of places, because of the fact that it's pretty remote. A lot of times you're not dealing with other people. If it's like a trail where there's people hiking and walking all the time and stuff like that, then try to get away from the road or try to get away from the trail. But most of the time I did it was like, if it was truck camping, it was like you pull off and there's a piece of BLM that runs right up against the road, or the road runs through it, and you just pull off the road and set up the tent. And 9 times out of 10, we never had anybody come even anywhere within eye shot where we were camping when we did that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. But yeah, I think that's why they do that, is what I'm trying to say, is that 300-foot buffers, so it opens it up to be like, yeah, you can get away from the road, so you're not, getting headlights in the tent and everything or whatever. But
I'll kind of scoot through a couple of these. The waterfowl production areas, we talked about these, just a few notes. North Dakota has over 289,000 acres of a habitat conserved by WPAs. These lands are purchased with funds from the sale of the migratory duck bird hunting conservation stamps, commonly known as the duck stamps. Vehicles are allowed only on designated roads, parking areas, and on the ice. It's interesting that they brought this up. On the ice, if ice fishing. Vehicle access to ice is limited to ice that is accessible from the right-of-way or designated roads. And then, like most of these, hunting is allowed in accordance with the Game and Fish.
no camping.
No camping. And pretty much all of the rest of these that I'm going to talk about, non-toxic shots. So got to be steel shot or bismuth is non-toxic, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Even if you're upland hunting, right? You can deer hunt, which I thought was interesting, and obviously I've never heard of a non-toxic deer round. So, well, any thoughts on those wildlife management areas or waterfowl production areas? Excuse me.
No, Gentry's not here.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
State Wildlife Refuge. I got this all from Lake Audubon. These are, if it's hard to find any detailed information on the refuges or on any public land, I struggle the most with refuges. I don't know about your guys' experience here, but because I think it's depending on I've heard depending on it depends whether they're open or not. And it's not clearly marked, right? You got to do your research to know whether they are not. Some of them are. It seems like there's a district, and kind of a district office that they have to confirm where they're at, because they'll just be small little random chunks of ground that are part of a refuge that you got to know. So. The one that I love and is near and dear to my heart is the Lake Audubon National Wildlife Refuge. They have some unique items. So hunting is allowed for deer hunting in accordance with the season, and then there is, after the deer season is over, there is a late season pheasant and grouse season that you can hunt, and you don't need a special permit or anything like that. And then ice fishing is absolutely allowed there. Just a side note, I've been talking to some people. I don't know if you guys have noticed this. Our bird numbers this year are unbelievable. I'm talking pheasants specifically. I've been seeing pheasants like I've never seen before. Like, this year is unbelievable. And I was talking to one of my buddies. I actually bought a new rifle. I think I told you about that. And he was like, yeah, this is everywhere I go. There's lots of birds, we got to get through this spring storm. We got to come up here, but it's going to be interesting what it's looking like.
I don't think the snow will stay, even if we get a foot.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I mean, the ground's pretty warm. You can see it today, melting about as fast as it's hitting the ground. So
you don't think it's messing with you don't think it's gonna mess with the hatch?
No, they're not nesting yet.
Okay.
If we get a ton of rain or we get a snow in a few weeks that's like this, then I think it would make quite a bit more of a difference. But I think we're still early enough that we'll be pretty safe. I mean, but it makes sense in theory. Pretty much all of our wildlife should be kicking butt, because this will be, it's not over yet. So knock on wood, this should be our third mild winter in a row without a ton of snow. And on top of that, we've had, we haven't had any insanely wet springs or insanely dry summers. Like, it's been very kind of moderate weather for the last 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's what they're thriving in. So I think if we keep that up, like deer, pheasants, ducks, I mean, Obviously, ducks has a lot to do with Canada, and I don't really know where they're at, but we should be doing good with numbers. Everything should be going up, I would think.
So what's your, so I was actually amazed to see, BLM land. Like, I didn't even know North Dakota had any until I found there's a pretty good chunk of it in the very extreme southwest corner of the state. Yep. And that's, have you guys seen any in North Dakota anywhere else?
There's some around the park, around Theodore Roosevelt in places, I believe. I don't know exactly where, but I think like east side of the park, like Billings County area, I think there's some good sized tracks out there. But I think, yeah, most of it's west, southwest.
Yeah, and the thing about BLM's open to hunting and fishing, regulated by the state agencies, so the Game and Fish in our case. You got to have licenses, really is where we're at there. And then we already talked about wildlife management areas. The only thing unique with the state land there again is, I already talked about it, the first 7 days of pheasant season closed to out-of-state hunters. The Kansas and other areas that out-of-state, closed for a bit of the season. Have you guys noticed that kind of stuff anywhere else? Because that's recent for plots. I think that went through, well, recent. It may have been like 10 years ago.
I don't remember seeing that in any of the other states that I've hunted. That doesn't mean it's not, true.
No, that was kind of interesting, that would be interesting because to your point, those hotels, restaurants, bars, all those things, that's a big deal, and I wonder how much that impacts their, the ancillary benefits that hunters bring to areas. I mean, they're going to come anyways; they'll just come a week later, so who knows? Maybe it's better. There is a different one that Gentry kept bringing up, Pheasants Forever. Do you guys know what that one's called?
Oh, the Paths program.
Yeah.
So I talked to a friend of mine that's a volunteer for Pheasants Forever about this a little bit. There's a couple of other states where they're doing the Paths program and actually like opening up public land or private land for public use. Through that, or they're purchasing land. I don't remember exactly how it works. They're purchasing land to open it up for public use. In North Dakota, they're not doing that. There's like a different part of the program that they're working on some stuff with in North Dakota, but they're not. In terms of opening up more land for public use, I believe what he said is in North Dakota they're not doing that. So I don't know the details on it. I would have to.
They might be funding plots.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah. I think it was something like that where they're going to, like that, budget line item or whatever for the state of North Dakota will go towards funding like the plots program or something like that. But I know in a couple of other states, I think like Minnesota and maybe South Dakota, they're doing, like they're actually opening up land for public use that wasn't already. So,
because the Mule Deer Foundation must do that in North Dakota because there's some pretty sizable chunks of ground.
Yeah, you'll see it as the same Mule Deer Foundation plots.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. The little bit I know about that organization, pretty impressed with them. So, any other thoughts, ideas? All right, so the spiritual parallel, biblical parallel. This I was trying to go through and figure out what would cover this, and this is one of those things that if I can meet, there's a lot of people from the Bible that I'd like to meet, but these two guys, Joshua and Caleb, if you guys are familiar in Numbers, it talks about the Israelites are out of Egypt. They're wandering around in the desert for a while, doing their thing, and then they get to the Jordan. They're going to cross in the Promised Land, and Moses says, "All right, pick 12 dudes, go spy out the land, see what's out there. One from each tribe." And so they all go, and it's just this is a little side note. There's 10 guys that come back and are just like, we can't do it. It's amazing. The wildlife is amazing. The agriculture is amazing, but the people are huge. They're quite literally giants. We just can't do it. And it says who they are and where they're from. And you can't they're just footnotes in history and nobody's named after them. Think about the number of Caleb's and Joshua's that you know, right? And the two that come back and are like, hey, look what God's done for us. We're gonna wipe the floor with these guys. Like Caleb says, these guys they're nothing. We can do this. Let's go. Let's do it right now. And
Joshua took a little coaxing though.
Yeah. But he was on board with it too, right? You're right. Caleb was by far the most outspoken one. But they both were like, let's do this. And because they had known and acknowledged where God was in their past, right? And when you when you include God in what you do, even if it's hard, sure, we've all got those tracts of ground or lakes or rivers or whatever that are near and dear to our hearts. But I don't know about you guys, but there's something about walking on a new piece of ground that you've never seen before. It's just it just that in itself is exciting, And I would say most of the time when I've done that, it's not a good fishing experience. Hunting, I think, is a little different. Usually it's pretty good. But it's exciting just to know like what's over that hill, to your guys' point, when you get out and you get away from the road and you get a mile off the road, you're not going to see, you're going to see way less people, when you're off the road. And I feel like that's an adventurous thing that God's put in us. That's phenomenal. Anyways, those are two guys I would love to meet and just be like, what was that like? How did you go out there and like it's documented, they literally saw giants, and for you to just go, no, we can do this. Let's do this. Right. So I just kind of thought that was a pretty cool lesson and thing to remember there. So
yeah, it's a lot of faith. I mean, it's a great display of just understanding like, hey, basically we follow the rules that God's put forth for us, like he's going to provide. We do what we're supposed to do, and he's going to be there with us. And it doesn't always present itself in the way that you think, as we've talked about before, but I do think that he has instilled in us, this type of explorer, like, in a smaller scale for most people, like a Lewis and Clark type, or Joshua and Caleb type desire to see new places. And I mean, I went to a piece of land that on the opening day of deer season this past year that we had only been to once, and we had gotten into a little bit, but not super deep. And I hiked like 3 miles in before the sun came up. Like I woke up at like 3:30 in the morning. I was like, I'm going all out. And I didn't see much, it wasn't an exceptional day by any means, but like you said, it was just one of those days where I was really grateful. The weather stunk. I mean, for anybody in North Dakota that was hunting on the opening Saturday last year, the snow's coming down. It's half ice. It's sideways. It's 20 degrees, but it feels like 10 below. And, your clothes are freezing and all that kind of stuff. It was a rough day. But yeah, that kind of like just wondering what's over that next hill and focusing on, being grateful to have the ability to not only be out, but, withstand the elements and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of room for gratitude. And I feel like it comes out more naturally sometimes when you're exploring new places.
Absolutely.
Because like you said, it's like every corner is a new little corner of God's creation that you haven't experienced before. And it's beautiful even if there's not a 170-inch buck running around. Like, it's still pretty cool to see.
But there could be.
He said
Yeah.
the first time we walked into this place, there's a, I don't know, clay cliff. And he said, I want to be setting up on that clay cliff and break daylight on that cliff right there. And that's what you did.
It is what I did. I didn't know when I said that it was going to be 35-mile-an-hour winds and snow.
And by the way, this cliff faces north.
Yep.
Yes, I was facing dead into the wind.
And it's probably the highest point for quite a while.
Yeah.
Quite a ways.
So nothing's breaking the wind.
Yeah, they were hunting like, I don't know, as the crow flies, probably 5-6 miles away that day, I think it was. It's probably about how far it was. And I could see their vehicle from where I was.
Yeah.
Most of the places on the property they were on, you can't even see the vehicle. But from where I was, I could see it clear as day. It was pretty funny. I saw a few deer. It was a fun day. But yeah, it was just one of those days that, and if it was I wouldn't say I experienced this a lot, but if it was a place that I had been a bunch of times, I probably would be more inclined to be like, this sucks. Like I maybe part of me would say I wish I would have stayed home.
Yeah.
But being that it was a new piece of land that I had never seen before, even though I wasn't seeing much for deer, it was like I didn't feel that at all. Because it was just like, man, this is awesome. And it is like objectively a really cool property.
It is.
It's beautiful, cool. And it's rough country. And I saw, even though I didn't see a lot of deer, I saw whitetails, mule deer, I saw turkeys, I saw an elk that day, which was complete shock. So it was, it was a cool day.
And the funny thing is the first time we were in there, we were like, man, if you shot a deer all the way back here, it's going to be a brutal pack out.
Yeah.
Right. So the next time he hunted it, and then my son-in-law and I hunted at Pat, and he actually killed the deer like 100 yards from the very furthest west point you could get in there. And so I don't know. I mean, I know a little bit about the lay of the land and stuff. And so when we walked out, I thought we had to go a certain way. So we kind of beat ourselves up a little bit, taking a very difficult. And then once we got out and got some elevation, I was like, we didn't really have to climb that hill. We could have just gone around this bottom and ended up in the same location. And then I went back in there and I shot a doe back in there. Not as far as Pat's, pretty close, but not as far. But yeah, that was Pat and I was.
I think it was almost 4 miles.
4 miles, just shy, like 3.9 miles.
Yeah.
So what was it that kept you away from this piece of ground for so long? Because you've been hunting there for a while, right?
No. He just.
Yeah, I found it on Onyx. The imagery just looked good, So we ended up being able to get access to it and went back in there, and yeah, it was just awesome. I mean, we've had a little bit of success. It hasn't been anything crazy, but last year was the first year that we had hunted it. So it's definitely going to be something we keep in mind. And it's a cool spot because there's a lot of flexibility for wind.
Yeah.
Some of the other spots, we've got quite a few pieces of ground that we can hunt. And, you've got those spots that you only have a certain way to access it.
Yep. So
you kind of are limited, as to what you can do with the wind. But that spot, just the way that it's laid out, like you can pretty much hunt it on almost any wind, because you just have some flexibility as to how you can get into it. So it's pretty cool.
But it's one of those places where there's so many nooks and crannies.
Yeah.
In it, and it's mean. And it's got a lot of timber on it, So it just seems like deer or turkeys pop out anywhere.
Yeah.
It's just.
Well, it's what you're looking for.
It's very cool. And, we don't know it yet. I mean, can I walk right in there and walk back out? Yeah. Do I know where the main features are? Yeah. But do I know it? No.
Yeah, and it's cool because
you have to hunt it for a while to figure that out.
And it's tucked in. So unless you're on that high hilltop or there's another high, not as high, but another part kind of around the side of it that we usually come in from, there's only a couple of spots where you can actually be and you see this big, huge basin. But like outside of it, I mean, just the way that it's laid out and the way that it kind of dumps in, like you wouldn't even know it was there.
Yeah.
And I think that's, kind of the double-edged sword of onyx that people complain about or go hunt or whatever. It's like, it's ruining these honey holes that people have. But I think the other side of it is that there's been so many, pushing against, public land access, like government, like we've talked about a few weeks back, that if it wasn't for the opening up of the knowledge and the accessibility to those lands with the software that's available, I don't think there'd be nearly as many people fighting the way that they are now for preserving the access to these public lands and preserving the lands themselves, because it's become so much greater of a resource now that people actually have a reliable way to, mostly reliable way to, find and kind of scout it and stuff like that. So
that one, I'd be shocked if we walked in there and somebody walked in to that, because it's a haul.
Yeah.
I mean, you beeline for, 2 miles?
I think it's a mile and a half.
Before you can
see really anything.
Even get into anything.
Yeah.
And the other cool thing about it is when we were we went in, we turkey hunted it, right? That was once.
And we didn't see anything.
But the booming ground, or the
leck,
sharp-tailed leck, he'd never seen one before. So as we came in, they were doing their dance.
That's
that
awesome.
that was a God moment too. Like that was just one of those simple things. But we're walking in, and the leck was right on the crest of this hill that you couldn't see over the other side, and the sun was rising, and it was just kind of coming up over the horizon, right behind. Like the birds were directly in line with the sunrise. And I tried to get it on the camera, and it didn't come out like hardly at all. But you could hear them making all the sounds and jumping at each other and doing all the stuff. And it was like
Stomping.
It was like the Lion King sunrise, and all these birds are jumping around. It was pretty awesome. That was just, and sometimes you don't think about it in the moment, but that was one of those moments where, like looking back, I'm just like, man, that was like God painting a picture.
And that's
we
one
just got to see there in that moment.
It was also, I mean, we aren't burning any daylight getting in there. I mean, we were walking, well, about as fast as I can walk anyway. And all of a sudden I just stopped. And I'm like, you hear that? And he's like, yeah. I go, you know what that is? I go, there's a leck right up here. But it registered. It's been a long time since I've been at a leck, because these trap birds.
Yeah.
And it just registered as we were walking what I was hearing. And then he got to see it for the first time too. And
those are
cool.
Yeah, those are, I don't know about once in a lifetime, but you remember those moments, right?
Absolutely.
And I was talking to somebody the other day, maybe it was Michael, but you often wonder what's heaven going to be like. And I wonder if in those moments you just have a glimpse of what it's going to be like, right? That you're like, man, God did this right now for us in this moment, right? Because I've had a couple experiences like that where it's just like it's a second or two of just like, wow, that is spectacular. And if anyways, that's we'll know when we get there, but
that's a good way to describe it. It's like that moment where everything stops. There's nothing else in your head, and it's just like, especially if you really appreciate the outdoors, it's just like pure bliss. You can't think of anything, any place you'd rather be in that moment. And the thing is, that's crazy to imagine is that, from what we're told in the Bible, like it pales, that even that would pale in comparison to the joy and the peace of heaven. But it's, that's why it's supernatural. It's like you can't, even the thing that seems so peaceful and beautiful in the natural world is just not even in the same dimension, literally.
Yeah.
So it's hard to, it's like thinking about the universe, like the size of the Milky Way or whatever. It's like you can't even fathom. It's not even, and we're not meant to,
Correct.
That's kind of the best part of it is that it's so far beyond
our recognition.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll be able to hunt and fish?
I hope so, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's a tough one. 'Cause you hope so, but it's also like, that's one thing I struggle with too, because they say like, all kinds of things that we think or feel are really great things, like, marriage, for example, but like they say, you're not married in heaven.
Yep.
And it's like, it's so hard to think about, but when you bring it down to like bare bones, the idea is that you're in full like joy and peace and communion with God, and there's nothing else you could need. So as much as it's like, I think there's a Tyler Childers song that said, "Can I bring my hounds to heaven?" It's like singing about being a coon hunter.
I like that.
I'm a fan of that guy.
I think that's a great, it's a great line, but it's also like, man, like when you really think about the way that it is, it's like, realistically, it's hard for me to say it, but probably not, because even those best moments, those things that we enjoy the most, will be so insignificant compared to what heaven will be, because the one thing I do hope is that, and I think some form of this might exist, I hope, is that there's like a library of like all of the things that have ever happened, all of the knowledge, all of the, obviously we're not meant to be God, but like it would be cool to get up there and be like happy, but also like, I'm thinking
Curious.
About stuff.
Yeah.
I just like to sit down with a good
Probably
book
just
and
have to ask.
or just ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too, but that would be cool.
Hey Moses, what were you thinking when you parted?
You see.
I know. Were you like, holy cow, that actually worked? Like, yeah, that's a good one.
Well said. Well said. Well, we're about at that time. Usually we'd be looking at Gentry right now going, what's your fact of the week? You guys got a fact of the week? Because I don't.
I got one I could do.
Oh.
Do you have one?
Go ahead.
This is something I found looking up this public land stuff that I figured could work because it didn't really come up. But the National Wildlife Refuge System, so, your waterfowl production areas and your refuges and those things. What is the year that started, and who started it?
Who and who started it? The president is what you're. Can I know that? Is it a president?
Roosevelt.
Yeah.
It's Roosevelt.
Yeah.
That should narrow down the dates for you.
Yeah. 1904.
I'm gonna say it's the 1930s.
It was 1903.
Oh,
Yeah.
dude.
I know I read that somewhere.
1930s was the wrong Roosevelt. That was Franklin.
Oh, yeah.
But yes, you had
Well,
three of the numbers correct.
1930s, there's so much that happened for
Yep.
conservation. I mean,
That's
so much.
And if
that
I
occurred.
remember correctly, the first refuge, as we know it from that system, and I could be getting this wrong because I don't have my notes, but it was a bird refuge in Florida.
Correct. It definitely was.
Yeah, which was like not what I expected.
Yep.
Like Teddy, you think about him, this Western hunter and big game and the mountains and all that kind of, but it was a bird refuge in Florida. So,
Or what was a bird lover? Ornithologist? Is that what it is?
That's
ornithology.
somebody who
Yeah,
Study of birds.
Ornithologist.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Because I think that's kind of what got him into it, right? That was his first love, was birds.
It could be. I don't know.
Oh. Because
He was
that's
kind of a geek.
yeah.
And then
He
he
went to Harvard.
Mhm.
he became like this very
Bad dude.
Man's
Yeah,
man.
that's what I'm
yeah.
like.
Yeah.
I can't say what I want to say, but
I knew what you were thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, no, there was just so much that happened in that time frame, in that 30-year time frame for conservation. It was just ridiculous.
It laid the groundwork for pretty much everything we've talked about today in
Yeah.
a lot of episodes. So
Yeah, and a lot of
Thank
legacy.
God for Teddy, because he's
Amen.
the one that started it.
And obviously him, yes, he's, you kind of think of the father of our modern conservation movement, but there you've talked about Leopold and all the others that probably the average person doesn't have any idea who they are, that, even per state and all the different areas of, and people that donate land, too, right? That's huge too. So.
John Muir is another one for those of you that are interested in those figures. He was he was buddies with some of those guys, and he was a really good, really big time. I don't know how much hunting he did, but he was a really big time, like naturalist conservationist, had a big part in Yosemite being preserved and whatnot. So John Muir, Muir, that's how it's spelled.
Yep.
All right.
So.
All right.
That's all I got. That went a lot better than I thought it was going to, if I'm being honest. So
Good.
Appreciate everybody. Have a
Check
great
us
week.
out on
Oh, yeah. Club Radio. Remember Saturday nights at 8 o'clock.
Yep.
Right. 100.7. And what's your
Wildbound Media.
Wildbound Media, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, Facebook.
like and subscribe?
Oh, yeah.